violence. Many of them could be clearly heard shouting anti-IRA slogans, and some are believed to be members of extreme right-wing groups. Lindsay Taylor has been investigating whether these groups have any links with loyalists in Ulster, and if last night's trouble had any political undertones.
Leaving Dublin last night, some England fans claim to be proud of their actions.
English and proud! English and proud! Proud the English!
But the same individual could clearly be seen at the match last night among those hurling missiles into the crowd. Evidence that extreme nationalists were at the centre of the violence, but also that some appeared to have an agenda that had nothing to do with football.
No surrender! No surrender! No surrender to the IRA! No surrender!
Certainly that's the view of the Millwall chairman, whose club in the past has had more than its fair share of crowd problems, many of them put down to extremists infiltrating the regular supporters.
I think it was organised nationally by a hardcore group of people who were out to make a political point.
That view's reinforced by the discovery of this calling card last night, published by the Daily Telegraph today. It appears to suggest the existence of a group of loyalist sympathisers in Cheltenham, though it's unknown to police.
Well, I've had a short conversation with the superintendent in charge of the Cheltenham subdivision, who tells me that he's never heard of the Cheltenham Volunteer Force, so-called, but there have been some calls from members of the public who believe they recognised Cheltenham people on the terraces in Dublin last night.
Information on who's causing the trouble at matches is held here at the National Criminal Intelligence Service's football unit. So is there a link between the right-wing hooligans and any Northern Ireland loyalist groups?
We have established links in the past between groups of hooligans, criminals associated with soccer in this country, and certain groups in Ulster, yes, and in Scotland. Whether the link is established that those groups are paramilitaries or whatever, I can't say categorically.
Well, what sort of form do those links take?
It's support for each other on certain demonstrations, mainly in opposition to Irish nationalist causes.
Can I ask you what the evidence for that is?
The evidence is that we've seen the people on video attending those marches are the same people that we've seen involved in disorder and violence at soccer.
Here they have their own collection of calling cards gathered over the years, some of them with pro-loyalist messages. When Channel 4 News telephoned the number on this one, the National Front's chairman answered. He denied NF members were involved in last night's violence, but admitted links with loyalist groups.
We have friendships with some loyalist political parties, but I would stress loyalist political parties.
Which political parties would they be?
Well, I'm not prepared to give that information, but all I'd say is that they're not with the sort of people that engage in the activities that we were all horrified by last night.
Some observers point to other extreme right-wing groups, such as Combat 18, reported to have been involved in the ugly scenes which marred the recent Chelsea-Millwall game. It has a publication which extols loyalism and hooliganism.
There are a number of British right-wingers who are serving terms of imprisonment at the moment who've been associated with Combat 18, the BNP and in fact the National Front. And they've been put away for running guns, including submachine guns, to the UDA and the UVF. There's evidence. The other connection is the Combat 18 here raises money for loyalist prisoners, and the most damning connection is that as part of the fundraising mechanism for these terrorist groups in Ulster, Combat 18 leaders have been peddling drugs.
But the links may be one way, according to some observers in the province, who believe loyalist groups want little to do with National Front types.
I think the loyalist element are very wary of being associated with the National Front because of the danger, of course, of the intelligence link which might be used to elicit some information about loyalists in London or beyond. And secondly, the unpopularity of the National Front is not something that gives the loyalists any great mileage. They would see it as maybe being an unpopular dimension to be associated with.
Whatever the motives of those causing last night's violence, once again England's footballing reputation is on the line, and on the evidence of some, because of those whose interests are not football.
Lindsay Taylor, well, we're joined now from Brussels by Glyn Ford, the Labour Euro MP, who's a member of the Consultative Committee on Racism in Europe. Glyn Ford, your studies in the past, and indeed in the present day, do depict, in your view, a Europe-wide, is it too strong a word to say, conspiracy of people who turn up at these matches?
Well, I think it's probably too strong to say conspiracy, but there are certainly groups of extreme right-wingers working together throughout sort of the European community, involved with football violence and football hooliganism. It's not limited to the United Kingdom. Clubs like Paris Saint-Germain in France have a hooligan extreme right-wing following. You've got the same problem with some of the Italian clubs as well, including Milan and Juventus. And of course, we have it in the United Kingdom, particularly around some clubs. Chelsea is one that's been named, Millwall, and others in the past.
What is the collective purpose?
The collective purpose is if you want to use football grounds to actually recruit members to extreme right-wing organisations, and they do that by attracting people who are interested in hooliganism and street fighting. And the British National Party at the recent Arsenal-Chelsea match were distributing leaflets encouraging people to go to Dublin for the match last night.
Do you have any sense at all that there are proven links between people seen at last night's match and any of these extremist groups you describe?
Yes, I mean the Anti-Nazi League, of which I'm the treasurer, has identified on film representatives from Combat 18 from Milton Keynes and the leader of the group in Cheltenham, the Cheltenham Volunteer Force. They were both seen last night on the television.
Tell us, I mean, this Cheltenham Volunteer Force, one thinks of that as a blue rinse centre of decency, not...
No, it's a group of extreme right-wingers close to Nazi circles in the United Kingdom that are regularly seen at these kind of events.
Well, now, where do you really put the risks from organisations like these to next year's European Football Championships?
Well, I think the next test is going to be what happens in Bruges on February the 28th, when Chelsea are going to be visiting there in the Cup Winners' Cup. If there's trouble there, I think that the Euro 96 is going to be in difficulty.
Well, I mean, but what are the problems confronting the authorities? We'll be talking to Graham Kelly from the FA later. I mean, how do you assess the scale of the threat from these groups?
Well, I mean, the problem is that they are a small percentage of football fans, a very small percentage. But as we saw from last night, you know, a few dozen people, certainly not more than 100 or so, are actually in a position to get a football match abandoned. Now, if that's the case, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for the authorities to actually guarantee that we do not have 100 of these people collected together at any time during Euro 96.
Glyn Ford in Brussels, thank you very much for joining us. When I hear the Prime Minister has described the behaviour of English football fans who rioted in Dublin last night as a disgrace and an embarrassment. The Football Association, however, says that despite the violence, England will stage next year's European Championships. In Dublin, the Irish Justice Minister Nora Owen said she deplored the hooliganism at the city's Lansdowne Road Stadium, calling for a thorough investigation. And she questioned whether the Irish police could have prevented what happened. As Sarah Shah now reports from Dublin, one of the main issues to examine is how English football hooligans managed to get hold of tickets for the match.
The Gardaí, Irish police in Dublin's O'Connell Street, hours after the match was abandoned, determined to stop the scenes of mayhem on the pitch from being reenacted here. Those English fans not already rounded up and sent out of the country were reluctant to be recognised. A few roamed the back streets. Irish supporters were more in evidence. They too were quickly moved on by the police, while most of the English fans were taking cover in hotel bars. The scenes of uncontrollable violence have also called into question the role of the Gardaí in allowing the instigators into the stadium. British police have claimed they consulted with their Irish counterparts on an almost hourly basis about known troublemakers. Channel 4 News has obtained a summary of documents passed between the two forces, which seems to bear out that claim, giving in meticulous detail names and flight numbers of people to watch. The Irish Justice Minister Nora Owen voiced her concerns publicly in the Dáil today.
The Gardaí showed great competence in getting the 45,000 people or so out of the grounds in just 13 minutes. But I have a concern that some of what happened might have been prevented. Public safety demands that we know what happened before, during and after this appalling violence. I want a tough and thorough investigation carried out.
The Gardaí themselves say they are not to blame, though observers here point out that Ireland has not had a history of this sort of violence, and they thought they could contain the troublemakers.
The tactics were to shepherd them from the ferries, shadow them throughout the day in the city, shepherd them to the grounds, corral them there, and then shepherd them back again as one group back to the ferries. They say that they were not aware that Irish fans were going to be sent into the same area of the West Stand.
Last night, those seat allocations resulted in some Irish fans finding themselves in the middle of the worst violence. One Irish fan says he bought tickets from a tout outside the ground for himself and his 9-year-old son.
We realised just prior to entering the ground that the tickets we would have had were in the English section, but given the nature of the tickets that we looked at, we assumed that they were within a safe section of the designated English section, so we made that conscious decision.
He told what happened after Ireland scored.
Those Irish amongst the crowd, supporters, celebrated the goal by jumping up and shouting and cheering, and this reacted with the English fans who didn't see them as being allowed to do that within their section. So they began to hit them. Within seconds of that happening, missiles began to fly over our heads down to the lower level, where I assumed it was probably Irish supporters, but apparently there was English supporters there as well.
You've got to ask the question, what were the Irish supporters doing in the English section?
There's no
there was
a
number of tickets. A number of tickets were sold to England officially through the England Travel Club. A number of tickets were sent back to Ireland. At the ground there were touts openly selling them outside the ground, and obviously there was no segregation in the ground.
Fans in the English section?
The lack of segregation caused the problem.
In London, the Football Association says of a 3,000 tickets sent to Britain, it sold 1,600 through the England Travel Club to registered fans. It insists it sent the rest back to the Irish Football Association. Tonight there were indications that at least some of those could have gone astray.
In the last couple of days, we in the FAI made a boo-boo, made a mistake, and issued 20 tickets or thereabouts in the front rows of where the English fans were sitting. And for that 20, we hold our hands up and say, we made a mistake, it should not have happened, we are deeply apologetic.
The question of how the English hooligans got their tickets remains.
I am in no doubt that the core question is how these thugs were apparently knowingly given tickets in the first place. The Gardaí were informed of the identity of these people. They knew their travel plans and their location since they arrived in this country. There is no power vested in the Gardaí or indeed the British police from the point that these people got tickets onwards to prevent those concerned from attending the match.
At the stadium today, there were still conflicting stories about the exact details of what happened last night. We've heard claims today from security guards on duty last night that a group of English fans isolated behind me on the North Terrace managed to break out and within minutes join English fans already rioting on the West Stand. Forensic teams picking through the debris found alcohol, drugs and mounds of white supremacist literature. The evidence collected, the tidying up began. To clear up exactly who was behind this shameful incident will take long and painstaking inquiry.
Sarah Sharp. Well, the Football Association's assertion that next year's European finals could go ahead safely in England has been given a cautious endorsement by UEFA, the European governing body. The FA was also backed by FIFA, representing world soccer. FIFA officials denied that the championships were in any danger.
No, not at all, because you cannot take one event, one single event, and then to put anything in question.
Until today, we have always said that the incidents, especially with English fans, or let's call it so-called fans, mostly happened abroad. We are probably safer in England with our matches than with English matches abroad.
Well, now we're joined in the studio by Graham Kelly, the Football Association Chief Executive. Graham Kelly, perhaps I could begin with the questions I opened Channel 4 News with tonight. And the first one was, who do you think these people are, the people who rioted, not by name, but by inclination?
I don't know who they are, John. I know who they're not. I can state quite categorically that the Football Association supplied 1,600 tickets to members of the England Travel Club. These people are vetted by police. They have no convictions for so-called football hooliganism, and they go to football matches with our sanction. What happens outside that, I really don't know. I think it was a helpful contribution on the programme tonight to see the alleged motives of some of these people, and I think that's very helpful indeed.
Well, but do you have other information about extreme right-wing activities in the terraces?
No, well, no, I don't. The police themselves are very sophisticated in their intelligence gathering in this country. We saw the reports that they'd supplied a lot of information across to Ireland, and that's always very helpful to us. We've done an enormous amount of work since our clubs got back into Europe in 1990. And we've had relatively trouble-free excursions with our clubs, and it was heartening then to hear Gerhard Aigner say that it would be the best place to stage Euro 96 in England because of the high degree of security and sophistication which our police bring to bear on a major international event of this nature. We've got a very secure system of ticketing, closed-circuit television. Everybody's name will be on a ticket, and the tickets won't be issued until 3 weeks before the matches. So we're very confident about the capability of football to handle Euro 96.
But it does take us to the absolute nub of the question, which seems to be exactly what went wrong last night. We heard Sean Connolly, the Secretary of the Irish FA, admitting that they'd made what he called a boo-boo in letting these tickets out in the way that they did. They clearly ended up in the hands of touts, and once tickets are in the hands of touts, you have no mechanism for preventing the wrong people ending up in the wrong part of the stand.
No, we haven't. No, we can only control who we give tickets to, and inside our own grounds in England, we bring sophistication, we bring a high degree of police enforcement to the situation where it's needed. Not every game, but if there's a high risk, we bring policing in and we control the situation.
But there are touts in England too, aren't there? I mean, it's hard to go to a ground where you don't meet a tout.
Oh, that's right.
Wembley's thick with them.
That's right, but Wembley is also very, very highly sophisticated insofar as crowd control is concerned. The closed-circuit television surveillance, the expertise of the police. Very, very good indeed, and we have every confidence in our police in England who control these situations.
Do you see a connection between the top and bottom of the game, if we regard what we saw last night as the bottom of the game, i.e. the worst of the misbehaving fans, and the top of the game, the administration, the dealing with inquiries into football players like Grobbelaar, into George Graham, the manager of Arsenal former, the ticketing problems that you've had, and the ongoing Cantona saga? Do you think that these in some way do have a relationship with the trouble at the other end?
No, I don't. Not when you see some of the people who are causing this trouble. I mean, they are evil people, and I would call upon anybody who knows any of these people to ring the hotline, the police hotline, which you're going to give out in a few minutes, because we want these people out of football, away from football.
But evil people, as you put it, can play in a pool where there is trouble at the top. I mean, it surely, if there is a whiff of trouble at the top, and after all, you've had an 18-month investigation going on into ticket misperformance by some people and by what are called bungs.
We haven't had ticket misperformance. We've had an inquiry which has been going on for 14 months, which is shortly due to report about so-called bungs. We've had a very...
You'd reject the charge then that you launch endless inquiries into things but end up not doing a great deal.
No. These are very complex financial matters, two of the points which you've raised there. We've had other issues to deal with. We've reacted very, very promptly indeed. England has an extra place in European football next season because of the fair play of our players on the field, and we're high in the rankings for fair play for next season. So, you know, it's a very, very tenuous link between the evil people who we've seen on our screens and on the front pages of our newspapers today and anything that happens inside the game.
Graham Kelly, thank you very much for joining us. And as you mentioned, the telephone hotline number for anyone who has information as to the identity